Glover, Larry Glover, retired Air Force Glover, Coach Glover, whichever one you want to use, all right? And I am here today to talk to you about PTSD, but I'm going to talk to you about it in a way that perhaps is different than any clinical training you may have gotten. Before I get started, this beautiful woman over here, that's my bride. Let's see, man, some.
Well, since I'm on the spot,
yes, some. And I think she's just here to make sure I don't mess this up. All right. Just a little bit about, like I said, the majority of my behavioral health experience. I've worked 31 years in military settings. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and then once I retired, I actually went and worked at Fort Gordon in the outpatient behavioral health center, dealing primarily with folks coming back from war with trauma. Trauma is not a new thing, okay? But what it's causing us to do is think about it differently. I was called into behavioral health. I was stationed in Montana, and the only way to get out of Montana was to get a new job. And so as a joke to myself, I said, well, I'll sign up for mental health as my last choice, not thinking that I was actually going to get it. But it was a calling, because fast forwarding, when I got to Germany, the first church I planted was inside of a mental health clinic. And what happened was I was running the intensive outpatient substance abuse program, and they came out with an initiative that says, hey, listen, we want to start doing some research in terms of faith-based treatment. And that was God just inviting me into the game. And what began to happen, so we kind of set it up where they come for individual treatment, they come for the regular things that came with their behavioral health, they see their therapist, but then every Wednesday evening we would have a group setting, and in that group setting, that was trying to reconnect them with God. And what was amazing about it, God began to do some amazing things that people were actually going and experiencing God, and they were actually going back to their psychiatrist and turning in medications and saying, listen, I found God. I don't need this anymore. And what happened is that it began to grow to the point that we outgrew our space. And so I'm sitting there saying, okay, God, what do we do now? Because the last thing I was thinking about is making a ministry out of that. But what happened is, the way it was supposed to work is the people that came, after they finished their part, they were supposed to leave. But they didn't leave. They kept bringing more people. And the next thing you know, we have a church. And that was the first church we planted that, like I said, was birthed inside the mental health clinic. And so there's always been a connection for me between mental health and God. And PTSD is one of the most unique diagnoses that we deal with. And here's why. It forces all three disciplines to learn to play together. And what disciplines am I talking about? Psychiatrists, psychologists, and the church. I can't tell you how many people, and there's a lot of research out there that will actually tell you that people who are dealing with trauma, when they are neglected of spiritual treatment, it takes them twice as long to get better. And so you say, where does that treatment come from? Where? Well, many of you might say, well, the chaplain in a military setting. Not necessarily, because what we're learning now is that chaplains deploy to the front lines. So how can people with trauma help people experiencing trauma? It's almost impossible. So I believe, and what I've seen is that, and God has just been amazing in that He's opened the door for me, even in a government system, where people that come and say, hey, listen, and I became known as, I want to see that guy that's going to also let me talk about God as I deal with my PTSD. Okay? And that became the way that it worked. And I can say again, and what's beautiful about it is, when I deal with folks from this, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. because there's an amazing therapist called the Holy Spirit that uses me in those sessions to create amazing outcomes. So what do I want to do today? I'm not going to spend so much time talking about the clinical aspect of it. More so, I want to kind of present it from the spiritual aspect. And what I want you to do is that I want you to look at PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but today I call it also known as spiritually broken syndrome. Trauma breaks a person's spirit. And what spirit are you talking about, sir? Spirit is defined as that engine in you, that thing that motivates you, that thing that is the evidence of life. People who experience trauma, that spirit dies, and therefore they are no longer living, they're actually surviving. And there's a difference. There's a difference between living and surviving. And here's what's fascinating. And trauma, and like I said, trauma comes in all kinds of forms. I've actually, we got folks that experience trauma in deployment, in the military. Certainly, we started to pay more attention to how many people were dealing with trauma because of sexual abuse that happened in settings in those deployments. But here's what's interesting, though. In the military, we make a big deal about people and PTSD and getting help. But you know what fascinates me? First responders and police get a pass. And they deal with trauma every day. And that blows my mind. That blows my mind. That nobody, in my theory, if anybody ever invited me to the table and said, well, why is it that we're having so many of these kind of police shootings? Well, if a person has PTSD, and when they show up to a scene, they're already in a fight or flight mindset, and guess what? That's not going to turn out well. But nobody's asking me. But they keep happening. And then I'll add another one. Okay? Relationship trauma that happens when someone commits an affair. Because what I'm finding is the same symptoms that the person that deploys shows with PTSD are the same symptoms that that person who was caught off guard by it. They become hypervigilant. Okay? They show all the hyperarousal symptoms. So so you're going to see that in your churches. Okay? Those people, and that's what I said. So to me, why do you call it trauma? Why do I call relationship affairs trauma? Because it has the same impact on the mind. You don't see it coming. Nothing prepares you. And so you're going to start the same stuff, reliving, re-experiencing, all of that stuff. So let me just talk to you. So these 3 B's, the beast, the box, and the battle. All right? So the first thing is this. We want to know what happened. How did they get this way? Well, the bottom line is, how did they get this way? They experienced a terrifying event, okay? And their mind did exactly what it was supposed to do. Respond in a normal way. That's all trauma is about. No matter what, the most difficult thing I have soldiers trying to understand is this. There is nothing that prepares you for that moment where you're going to have a conversation with death. And here's how death shows up in a deployment setting. Person's in the deployment setting, everything's going well for a moment, and all of a sudden death knocks on your door. Boop, boop, boop. I want to introduce myself to you because there's the potential you and I are going to meet during this deployment. How does death introduce itself? Either they see it, okay, they see it, they hear about it, or they themselves experience it, okay? And what happens is, any person that experienced trauma is going to come back in a box. Now, let's talk about this box for a moment. The difference in this box is 6 feet. The person that experiences trauma and they have a physical death, they come back in a box, and the difference is they are 6 feet under. Okay, that life is over. The person who has an experience with trauma and an interaction with trauma, and they have what I call a spiritual death, they too come back in a box, but the difference is they have to live. But both of them, their lives start to behave the same. And I'm going to talk about this box a little bit more in a second, okay? Because this box also represents something that you know, which is what I call isolation. People in the box. Avoidance behaviors. People in the box, okay? So what happened? What happened? When you had that experience, when they had that conversation with death, and be it again, first responders, it doesn't matter. When you have that, what happens is now you got to make a decision. And for the soldier has to figure out, okay, if I deal with the reality of death in this setting, then what that means, I'm going to be thinking about death the whole time. And if I'm thinking about death, I can't do my job. If I can't do my job, people get hurt. So that's not an option. I can't run around thinking about my family members and how they will respond if something happens. Okay? Can't do that. If I am afraid, if I allow fear to consume me, then they're going to put me on a plane and they're going to send me back, and you're going to be evaluated by a person like Mr. Glover, and chances are you're probably going to be discharged from the military medically. I don't want that either. So what do I got to do? Well, at this very moment, you're going to make a decision. And that decision is simply this. Forget about it. Death, if you want me, here I am. I'm not running from you. I'm no longer afraid of you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to become more courageous, and I'm coming to look for you. Something changes at that moment. And what changes is, in order to make peace with death, every positive emotion gets turned off. Every positive emotion is done. So what are you saying? There is no compassion. There is no empathy. There is no patience. Why? Because that spirit is broken now. And it also describes what the DSM calls emotional numbing. All that simply happened is deployment teaches people, or trauma teaches people, it's not safe to feel. I got to still live, but I'm going to live without feelings. And those are people that come to your church every Sunday. Every Sunday. I got to live. And the safest way for me to survive this trauma is to try to not feel. And guess what? And I heard someone ask that question this morning about anger. Well, here's the deal. The only emotion that is allowed to stay is anger. This, my friends, is your new spirit. Now, anger turned inward will manifest itself as depression. Why? Why am I angry? Because I can't change what happened. I'm left helpless and hopeless.
Say that one more time.
I can't change what happened. And if you ever want to experience helplessness and hopelessness, meet a person that's there. I would love to not be any of this, but I can't change it. So when you're going to say, pray, brother, harder, I wish I could. Trust God, I wish I could. You just got to come out of this. I really wish I could. I really, really wish that I could do what you're asking. Okay? Yes. But when I feel helpless, okay, and that anger turned inward, and now let's talk about the association now. Okay, so now why am I angry? Why are people angry? People that are victims of sexual assault or any sort of trauma. Why am I angry? Here's one of the things I'm angry because it was an injustice. This should not have happened. Now, this injustice creates for me now God questions. If you're God, explain this to me. Help me to understand, if you're God, why did this happen? And you didn't do anything about it. And the old saved soul says, oh, don't say that. You can't say those things about God. You shouldn't question God. Oh, break out the holy water and let's dap him up. Yeah. Because here's what trauma does. Trauma actually brings about more questions about God than answers. And the question is, where do they go to ask these questions? A straight behavioral health therapist is going to say, well, listen, you know, and trust me, I work in clinical settings, and they are quick to tell them, listen, you need to take that God question and you need to go find somebody else because that's not what we do. Okay?
But it can be
Trust me.
toolbox that we use.
Trust me. In clinical settings, okay, especially in military settings, I'm just telling you what I know. Okay, and so they're left there to say, okay, and again, I'm not going back to church. Okay, well, why? Why am I not going back to church? Well, here's why. First of all, I'm different. I don't necessarily identify anymore with those people. But you know what the main reason why they don't go back to church? Is because the church can't accommodate their symptoms.
Say that.
The church can't accommodate their symptoms. I had a pastor that came to see me. He was a reservist and deployed. And by the time he came to see me, he'd actually resigned from pastoring. And the reason that he resigned is because he couldn't handle the choir being behind him. Because one thing about PTSD patients or people, they need everything to stay in front of them. Nothing gets behind them. That's why when they go to a restaurant, they're going to find a table where they can keep everything in front of them.
Wow.
Okay? Because one thing they promised themselves, I will never be blindsided again, no matter what it costs me. I will never be blindsided again. So let's go back and let's kind of talk about, again, so this anger, guys, let's come back to this anger, this new spirit. If anger is my new baseline, okay, and notice there was a change. There may be a time where I would get angry, but I could come back to my chill spot. If anger is not my new baseline, the next time someone commits an injustice, see, people don't do just stupid things anymore. You commit injustices. So if I'm driving down the highway and you cut me off, that's an injustice. And guess what? When people commit injustices, somebody's got to pay. Okay? And so now they go from anger to rage. Thus, the beast. We have a program that I actually still teach at Fort Gordon, the Functional Recovery Program. And the reason that we started that program some 8-9 years ago, and it's actually a program where we actually now invite family members to come, because if there's ever a failure in the system, especially in the government system, the failure is we never prepare spouses for what comes back. And somehow we expect them to figure it out. While the numbers are screaming to us via divorce rates, via suicide rates, via substance abuse incidents, that it's not working. And so part of the mission in that program, my mission and my role in that program, is to bring spouses in and help you to understand why your honey is behaving like this. They don't want it. But because they did their job well, this is what they become.
But the way you're explaining it is as if though you don't necessarily have to be in the military.
No, right.
It can
Any traumatic experience, yes. Yeah, and I just use military as kind of a basis, but any trauma, absolutely. You can take what I'm saying and put the person that responded to the fire and had to carry that body out. You can put that into the policeman that showed up to that car accident and had to give care to that baby, and that baby dies in their arms. Okay, these are stories that I hear. These are people that I see. Okay?
The seminaries do not prepare pastors' wives.
Absolutely
Or
not.
what the pastor deals with.
Yes.
Brings them back home.
Yes.
To the house.
Yes. What we're finding out, what I like about what's happening is, what we're also finding now is that, part of the reason why the DSM-5 changed the criteria for diagnosing PTSD is because at Fort Gordon, we've got people that have never deployed, but yet you sit there all day and you watch that screen and you're seeing bad things happen. Okay, you don't have to leave that computer, and yes, you can get it. And that's why we promoted changing that DSM-5. Because it excluded them initially. Okay? It excluded them.
Sir, I was going to talk to you about this afterwards, but I should share it to the room. For police officers and firefighters, there's an organization in the CSRA called Support One. It was a police officer who lost his partner in the line of duty, and they have an amazing program for police officers, for first responders.
Yes.
So if anyone needs their information, just
Yes.
get here.
And we're going to get to that because the first thing is this, guys, we got to say, yes, there are resources out there, but if I am spiritually broken, man, those resources mean nothing to me. See, again, in order to appreciate resources, I have to make my mind up that I want to live again. See, all right? I got to make up my mind first. And so when you're coming into this picture, what you're really coming into this picture is that I want you to picture this. I want you to picture Adam when God first created Adam. The Bible says what? That Adam was there and he was just a shell of a being. And Adam did not become alive until God breathed his spirit into him. Right. These people, man, the spirit life has been sucked out of them. And right now, what they need most is somebody to come and help them breathe. Amen. Wow. Somebody to just come and help perform CPR for me, please. Because I'm dying in here. And that's what life is like in the box. The box is where people go because living is outside that box. People who live in this are just waiting to die. It also explains the connection between suicide and trauma. Because when you've given up on living and you're in your box, every day starts to look the same. Okay? And before you know it, and usually what happens is there's only one thing that keeps them living, and it might be a child, it might be the spouse, but what happens is that here's where suicide really becomes a problem, is that when that reason is taken away, that's where suicide shows up.
My God.
Because you got to understand now, I'm already here waiting to die. And that's why you might see a lot of what we call high-risk behaviors. Okay? I've had patients, man, that will get on that motorcycle and drive that thing 160 miles per hour and think that's just the greatest thrill ever. And I say to them simply, listen, man, you know why you do that? Because you're still looking for death.
And don't even realize.
Mm-mm. When you're not afraid of it anymore, then everything's on the board. Okay? So,
One here, she's with me that has been through several traumatic experiences in her life, and she's in that box.
well, we're going to get out that box today. Okay? So, that beast, here's what's fascinating about that beast. That beast, when that injustice, and let me tell you something, this is how simple the injustice can be. It can be the spouse coming in and they're in their box. And the other thing about this box is this box represents that place in their house where they spend the majority of their time isolating by themselves.
Yeah, on the phone, on the computer.
Yeah.
And the box is made of plexiglass.
Come on.
Oh, you better preach.
Come on. Okay, now, there's one thing about that box now. I'm going to help you. If you know somebody that's in their box, I'm going to help you. They put a sign up on the outside that says, leave me alone. Now, since you don't like the beast, you're always complaining about how the beast behaves. You're always telling me the beast is disrespectful. You're always telling me, why is the beast so mean? Why does the beast get angry so fast? So I'm going to do everybody a favor. Since you don't like the beast, I'm going to take the beast and I'm going to bring it into the box. Now, if you go past this sign, you must want the beast. I'm doing my best to stay away from everybody. I'm trying to make this work. But if you can't respect the box, it's on. And if you ever really want to meet the beast, try to force them to come out and go somewhere. Come on and go to church. Nope. Why? You used to go to church all the time. Not going. I need you to go. I'll give you 3 warning shots. Now I'm going to send you to church with an interaction with the beast. Now you need church now to recover from what this beast is going to do. And here's what's interesting about the beast, guys. The beast has no respect of relationship at that time. When you commit an injustice, you actually now are an object. In a military setting, I tell people that have this, I say, listen, the best thing I can do for you is to perhaps help you get out medically. Why? Because the beast doesn't respect rank anymore. And you'll see it in other settings as well, where if they feel like that there was an injustice based on that leader, you'll see it at work. Especially my folks that experience sexual trauma. They're very sensitive. And if they feel like that leader's doing an injustice to them, oh yeah, you're going to see that beast. Okay? And remember, it has no respect. Because it's not looking at you as a relationship. It's looking at you as you're the person who has committed an injustice, and I made a commitment after that trauma. Nobody will ever get another free pass. You tracking me, sir? Nobody right there will get a pass. You commit the injustice, I will no longer feel helpless. And how? Because the beast actually empowers me.
I've got a patient who is a tanker on deployment. A 12-year-old came up to surrender to him, but was wired. He shoots the kid several times. The device explodes, spraying him and crew with parts. A year later, he's getting kicked out of the Army for assaulting an officer.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
Good example.
Yes.
Ever since then, he's lost job after job after job because he's tried to work in food things, and if he sees someone harassing waiters.
Yes.
Injustice.
Any injustice. And that's the new mindset, any injustice. I mean, this thing is so simple as an injustice as children making too much noise in the house. That's no longer children playing and children being children. That's children committing an injustice. Man, I'm telling you, this thing is real. Okay? It is real.
And it's not just military. It's
No,
anybody
it's
who's
across.
had trauma.
Well, and now, you know, I call myself retiring twice, and I still ain't figured out how to retire yet. I really haven't, because I retire, and then God gives me another call. And so my former boss, Jay Earls, his church had a vision, and they actually built a mental health facility for him. And the pastor told him, I just believe that God is going to call you to come and run this clinic for us. And it's the beautiful thing about it, guys, it's all faith-based. Okay? And so now I'm having those conversations with people who are not just military-related trauma. I'm dealing with those people who are experiencing sexual trauma, childhood trauma, all of that stuff. Okay? So again, let me just continue in talking about, you know, that box and this beast and all these. Again, there's no positive emotions that they're able to share. What was so sad about it for me is that they don't laugh anymore. I think that's the biggest thing that hurts me, is when trauma takes away your laugh and your smile. I mean, just can you imagine just living your life where laughter is not a part of it? See, that's what I want you to put yourself in, that position where you can't even laugh anymore. I mean, fun things are happening around you, but you can't connect to it. And that's the one thing about this box, guys. If you notice this box has boundaries. This box has walls. And what that means is that it is impossible to connect with anything as long as you're in that box. Even God. I often tell people, here's what happens. The moment you experience trauma, the moment you make peace with death, the moment this emotional numbing sets in, there's a great eviction that's taking place, and that's the Holy Spirit. In order for this stuff to exist, the Holy Spirit's got to be evicted. Because light and dark cannot mix. And trust me, this is darkness. Okay? And so now let's not get it confused. Because I remind them, no, I'm not telling you you don't believe in God. I'm just telling you that now God is an extension. He's not living on the inside. Okay? Because if he's living on the inside, then he's going to bring you peace. Okay? All right, so let's continue to dance, all right? Let's continue to dance here. So now I've got this spiritually broken, and guys, and even if you're dealing with folks that may not be religious, every one of us got a spirit. And PTSD has a personality of its own. And when you experience trauma, you now take on that personality, which explains the symptoms. I often give folks a simple test, because one of the things about people with trauma, you ever want to irk them, here's how you irk them. When you make the observation, you've changed. If you ever want to upset a person, point that out. Because they need to believe they haven't. They need to believe that what I'm doing is normal. And they're not going to take that away, because why? If what you're saying is true, then what does that mean I have to do? If I don't want to change, then I'm going to tell you what to do with that comment. All right? I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. Yeah, if I don't want to change. And why don't they want to change? Okay, why don't they want to change? Because they are comfortable in all this. No matter how much you look on the outside and say, man, this is crazy. I mean, look at all this stuff you're doing. And yes, that makes sense. But guess what? It's still comfortable. So now, all of a sudden, you want to pull me out of my comfort zone. And then let me just say to you again, you know, and I'll kind of talk about that comfort zone. Man, listen, when they come to your church, okay, they're already irritated. You know why they're irritated? Because the music's too loud. Why is the music bothering me?
Too many people.
Yes. Now you're sitting there and you're saying, you're going to make the mistake. Wait a minute now, you feel like that in God's house? You mean to tell me you are afraid in God's house? Yes. Why? Let me skip over here and talk about this thing called the amygdala. Okay? The amygdala is just simply this. It's just a part of our brain that actually where we process and experience trauma. Okay? When the amygdala is actually working the way it's supposed to work, the amygdala is actually that thing that God gave us that makes it instinctive. In other words, if I'm driving in an unsafe part of Augusta, and I've never experienced trauma, right? Then my amygdala is going to kick in and say, okay, listen, you need to be a little bit more aware. You need to be a little bit more focused. You're going to do a little bit more scanning your surrounding, checking things out because you're not in a safe place. Okay? All right? Now, I don't behave like that if I'm driving in Evans. Okay? But for people who experience trauma, they take that brain everywhere. So what does that mean? You can be in a car with a person who experienced trauma going to the same place having two different experiences. Because their brain is telling them, and I can't tell you how many fights I have to deal with when well, what happened, man? She was driving down the road, and I thought I saw a bomb, and she didn't pull over. Well, what actually was a brown paper bag. But he experienced, that's a roadside bomb, and I need you to pay attention to it. Her brain is not telling her that. She's just saying it's a bag, and I'm going to keep moving. And the beast comes out to the point now, I say, well, how do you stop it? She don't drive anymore. I refuse it. If she's got to drive, I will not get in the car. So again, and here's what else has happened. So that the amygdala, it's no longer working the way it's designed to work. So what it's going to say is this now. I'm just going to stay in alert mode. Why? Because I'm fulfilling this promise. I'll never be blindsided again. Now, let's talk about the five senses and how the amygdala actually now reassigns our five senses. This is really what man, if you read the Bible invites us to experience God through our senses. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Okay? Make a joyful noise. All of these things. Well, for the person who experiences trauma, these things have been reassigned. And you know what they're reassigned to do? Detect danger. So, sight, if we're going on a date, I really would love to be able to look in your eyes and tell you how beautiful you are. I would really want to make this romantic. But my brain is telling me I need to be watching this guy over in the corner because I don't know what he's up to. He looks suspicious. I need to be scanning this whole place, making sure that if something happens, I got a plan to get you out of here. So I don't have time, baby, to look in your eyes and become distracted by you. Because my mission in life is to detect danger. Here, when the band is blasting, I need to hear triggers that tell me something's about to happen. When you got all that loud noise playing, I can't hear that. So I'm irritated by it. I'm irritated by children in the house making noise. To tell you how awesome this is that's why they don't sleep, because I tell them, I said, listen, man, your brain can only do one thing at one time. No matter how much you think you can multitask, you can't. And so what happens at night? Either you're going to be alert or you're going to sleep, but you're not going to do both. So what they do, they settle for kind of this semi-conscious sleep that actually is not restorative in nature. I think just sometimes, I tell folks, just sometimes I could just get you 6 hours of sleep. You know, I think I've done more for you clinically than anything. If I can just, why? Because their amygdala tells them it's not safe to sleep. Now, can you imagine trying to fight that and go to sleep? My brain is telling me if I fall asleep, I'm vulnerable. If I fall asleep, I can't be on guard. If I fall asleep, something might happen and I can't do anything about it. Okay? This is the big one. Touch. They don't want to be touched. You running up on them, hey, brother, let me hug you. And they're doing like this, and you're like, I'm coming in. And they're doing like this, I'm still coming in. They don't want to be touched. Why? My touch has been reassigned for danger. And here's what fascinates me about it. Can you imagine a couple where the spouse no longer has access to their honey? And what I mean by that is that if that spouse came up behind them unannounced, a spouse has actually got to say, I'm coming in, I'm behind you, or I don't even hug you from behind anymore. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine what it's like to see your baby and want to put your arm just, there was a time where, that was fun, right? That was fun. You run behind each other and hug each other, and you're like, oh, he's so cute. All right. That's not cute anymore. And it's the same thing because the amygdala tells them, treat all touch as threatening until you have information to say it's safe. Even you having your greatest, warmest intentions, you're a threat first until I have enough information to say you're safe. Can you imagine that? You think these masks did something to us? Can you imagine a person that's walking around that can't experience the joy of touch? Yeah. Yes, don't like it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And so you mind, I got to live my whole life kind of like this. Yeah, because touch is threatening. Touch detects danger. Yes. So, all of this stuff now has been reassigned. And those of you that work in the trauma field, the 4th of July is the worst therapy day in my life. Because the next day they're running in saying, listen, I've had some man go over and threaten to kill neighbors if they shot another firecracker. Why? Hear, sound, and as you said, sir, re-experience. Now I'm reliving that same trauma. Okay? So, again, we got all the senses have been reassigned. And so, again, how can I experience God if all this has been turned off? Okay? Another thing is that my amygdala will not allow me to appreciate Scripture. It is why God says, come, let us reason together. People with trauma, you're not going to be able to make sense of God in your amygdala. It's not designed for that. You will only be able to understand God when you come here. So you can sit there and break out Scripture and you can quote it and you can dance with it and you can tell them all these promises, but if they're not in the part of their brain that can appreciate that, it's just words. It's just words. And the reality is this, guys. So when we talk about just, again, some basic symptoms of PTSD, we're talking about behaviorally, you got irritability, agitation, hypervigilance, hyperarousal. Can you imagine? And hypervigilance is just a fancy word for being paranoid. Can you imagine walking around all day and you got to look over your shoulders to figure out who's doing what? You can't even ever relax because you got to stay in a hyperarousal state. Can you imagine how energy draining that is? And so what does this cause me to do? This causes me to problem solve. Guess what? I'm going to make my life simple. Anything complicated, I don't do. And here's what's fascinating. Unless you know something I don't know, please somebody tell me what's simple about a relationship, especially a marriage. No offense, honey. See, I had to clean that up, right? What? Tell me what's simple about it.
Nothing.
Okay? No. And here's, guys, how they make it simple. Here's how they make it simple. They make it simple by changing how we communicate. And here's how communication changes. PTSD folks and trauma folks, they don't want you to talk to them anymore. They want you to brief them. Just give me the facts. When you come up to them, you're saying, hey, baby, let me tell you about my day. And so what? Hey, baby, no, I really want to share this. And, hey, baby, so-and-so down the street died. People die. What you want from me? Yeah, because what they're saying is, if you really want to talk romantically to me, in my language, then what you got to say is, hey, baby, here's how we're going to do it. Tomorrow morning, we're no longer going to an outing. We're going on a mission. The mission is to go to Walmart. When we get to Walmart, we're going to leave the house at 0700. All right, and we're going to rally. We're going to get to Walmart. When we go in, all right, here's the plan. You're going to go over to the vegetable department. You're going to go over to the food. Johnny, Mary, you stay your little butts right in here where I can see you in the perimeter. And guess what? The rally time will be 8 o'clock. All right, 8 o'clock. If you're not back here at the rally point by 8 o'clock, the beast is coming to look for you. And when you start to talk to them like that, say, oh, that's so sexy. Say some more. Brief me again. I love it. Now we're talking. Yeah. Because, no emotions. You are wasting your time. And they're comfortable, even though you say, you're just so cold. They say, okay. Why? Because every positive emotion is turned off. I'm going to be cold. Remember, why am I cold? Because that trauma taught me, man, if you feel, you might die. So let's not feel. Okay? All right, let's fast forward this stuff. So again, as we talked about, what is the psychological part of the trauma? Fear, depression, anxiety, re-experience. You know what? PTSD fascinates me because, man, it's one of the only diagnoses, man, that it throws a whole book at you. It would be nice if you just saying, well, they're only experiencing depression. Man, you got to deal with depression. You got to deal with anxiety. You got to deal with suicide. Then you got to deal with the physical pain, the aches, the hurts. And now do you see why I said that it forces all the disciplines to play together? It's the only chance we got. Okay? All right? The physical part, poor sleep, pain. Spiritually, God questions loss of faith. God, help me to understand why. Where were you when this person took advantage of me sexually? God, how do I have to live with the fact that I had to do something to a child in deployment to survive? And guys, and let me tell you what is, and to those are really hard because guess what? They feel guilty about even having their own children. And let me just throw this into you now. I'm kind of talking to you from the adult experience of dealing with folks with trauma or perhaps living with folks with trauma. Imagine what the children are going through. Because the children's questions are very simple. Mom, why is Dad so angry all the time? Mom, why doesn't Dad go anywhere with us anymore? Dad, why does mom don't want me to hug her anymore? They got basic questions. At the functional recovery program, we used to, during family week, we would bring the children, and we'd have some of the children get up and kind of talk to their parent about, what it was like to live in this new environment. And it became so emotionally overwhelming that we had to stop. Because when that person was sitting here and listening to it from their child's perspective, it was too much. Because the child was just talking from a natural experience, being 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Very difficult, okay? So let's now talk about this thing, okay? Oh, other thing, let me ask you. So now, there are some people that are already invited into the box, okay? Jack, Jim, Bud, Miller, they can come in. Those are my boys. Why? It makes so much sense to me. Okay? If I am spiritually broken, alcohol is a spirit. If I don't have one, then I need to manufacture one. And I've heard folks say this to me thousands of times. I've heard the person that's living with the person with the PTSD say, I actually like them better when they drink, because at least they laugh and come out the box.
Wow.
Yeah, I hear these things. Okay? Yeah. Why? Again, yeah, that's that thing that makes me feel alive. And guys, I'm talking about, I've got guys that say, man, listen, if Mr. Glove, I'm going to be very honest with you. If you really want me to go to that park, then I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to take 2 drinks. So now, do you want me to keep drinking, or do you want me to stay in the box? No, I say, you evil rascal. No. Okay? Galatians 5:22 through 23. Who's familiar with that? Can somebody pull that up for me? Galatians 5:22 through 23. Anybody got that? Somebody read that loud. Yes. Come on. Who's got it? Yes, we're talking about the fruit of the Spirit. Yes. Somebody read that. Stand up, ma'am. Stand up.
By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things.
Can I break it in? That spirit can't produce that. This spirit can't produce that. And that's what's in your church. That spiritual being that will love to be able to do that. Okay? So, part of it is, okay, so Pastor Glover, what do we do? Okay? What do we do? I would love to be able to see where we get to a point where we are able to, in the church, become intentional about addressing people that have trauma and the spiritual approach to it. What's the biggest challenge you're going to face? Cognitive behavioral therapy. I call it now Christian behavioral therapy. All right? What is Christian behavioral therapy? Where in cognitive behavioral therapy, it talks about the ABCD model. A being activating the event, B being belief system, C being the consequence of that belief, D being how we dispute what we believe, and then E, the emotional outcome should be different, right? Well, guess what? If they really believe the world is a threatening place and that I can't trust God, why can't I trust Him? Because if God was God, this wouldn't have happened. So I got to be my own God. Because He failed me. I have to take matters into my own hands. Okay? I'll still go to church, but I'm not going to trust Him. That's why when I come to church, I need to be on the last row. And be careful, because the truth of the matter is, many of them don't leave home without a weapon. Because that's the new God. be careful how many people will be in your church with weapons, with trauma. Okay? And so everything here, fear, and let me add this to fear. Here's what's fascinating. You know, I said fear of death will meet a person in deployment. Here's what blows my mind. Fear does not mess with them in deployment. It waits until they get home. That blows my mind. Okay? The place where I should experience it, I didn't. But now when I come home, my whole world is driven by fear. Blows my mind. Hopefully what you see is Satan all in this. Okay? Stealing, killing, destroying. He's all in this. Okay? So what does the church do? The first thing is this: don't judge. Don't judge. Please do not judge, because let me tell you something. If they could be different, they would. They don't want this. Training a new psychologist at Fort Gordon, we have an internship and residency. When I was working there, I used to tell them, well, how do you diagnose PTSD? It's very simple. The person that comes in and is talking about it, they don't have it. The person that comes in and they don't want to talk about it, be impressed by that one. Okay? Because it's like pulling teeth during that interview. They don't want it. Okay? Prayer plus therapy plus meds plus the word works. I wrestle with some pastors who believe that prayers can do anything. Well, I argued that. I said, if that were true, then why did Jesus say to us that there are some things cometh not except by fasting and praying? He said there's some things that you're going to need to add to your prayer. Okay? Now, if the psychiatrist is doing their part, the therapist is doing their part, the church is doing their part, man, we got them. We got it covered now. Because now you can come to me and you can be able to say to me, yes, Pastor, I know the word says fear not. I know the word says be not dismayed. I know what the spirit of the fruit is, but Pastor, help me understand, why is it that I can't appreciate that? Man, it's so easy, man. Trauma broke your spirit, man. Trauma put you in a part of your brain that you can't appreciate Scripture. So come, let us reason together. But the main thing I tell them is this: your prayer simply got to be this: God, you got to breathe for me again. You got to do for me what you did for Adam, because I never knew that I was actually dying. So you got to come in and do something in my life that right now I can't do for myself. And you pray that with them, because they're trying to do this on their own. But when you say, all right, all I want you to do is just pray that, God, you got to breathe for me again. And that's it. And the next thing you know, that Holy Spirit will do something amazing. And I have some amazing testimonies, because one of that pastor that I told you about, he thought enough of that experience that he went back to pastoring, and I go and preach his anniversary every year, because he's up front with this church. And, the first thing he told him, he said, when I came back, I didn't even want to be with my wife. I didn't even love her. He says, but through that man, God spoke to me again, and I was able to make sense out of what happened. And here's the best way to make sense out of what happened. The greatest trick of the enemy is always give God the blame. Bad things happen because people do bad things. And God is not going to stop that. That is free will, that the same free will we used for me when I decided I didn't want to be saved. That same free will that is given to people that will decide to either obey God or disobey God. This is the world that we live in. Bad things happen to good people. Okay? But you don't have to walk it alone. I'm praying that there's a ministry out there called Reboot Recovery. Okay? And Reboot Recover is actually a structured 12-week program. And for people with trauma, all sorts of trauma, and it's a faith-based model. If that's something your church is interested in, you go to the website, Reboot Recovery, and you can actually get trained and actually start that ministry in your church. Or maybe start that ministry in your church and start announcing to the community, hey, we have Reboot. Other thing that I would encourage, if you're going to do a small group with PTSD members, I found that, man, that was one of the most effective things that we offered, was a group where people that were struggling could come together and recognize, I'm not the only one that feels this way. Okay? Even if you have a PTSD support group where they meet, I would encourage you that, again, I think that what I found to be the best experience is to separate that by gender. Okay, so you got a female support group and then a male support group because the dynamics are different. Okay, so if that's something you want to do. And listen, guys, you don't have to be rocket scientists when you talk about support. All right, you have those skills. I've kind of educated you with what they're experiencing. Take this education down and say, okay, God, what do I do with this information? How can I shape this into a support ministry? Now that I know what I know, now that I know that they're being challenged by the scripture, God, how can I help them? Okay, that's what this is about. Inviting you into the fight, because that's the battle. I tell you what, this board does not have spell check.
What do you have, did you talk about accommodating symptoms, the 31 days?
Accommodate symptoms. And what I mean by accommodate symptoms is that if a person, let's say a guy comes to you and says, listen, man, I'm really bothered by that music. Here's what I tell them. Hey, man, listen, you come to church after the band is done.
That's right.
Okay? Right? Hey, man, I really need to sit in the back. No problem, man. Sit in the back, and here's what I want you to do. Before the church is over, get up and leave.
Because crowds
Yes, sir.
very intimidating.
Absolutely.
With the military, but just anybody going through trauma.
Yes.
Crowds are very.
And here's why. They can't watch all of you.
That's right.
Because, see, you're walking in there thinking that they're in an environment where I'm at church. No, I'm in an environment that feels just like being downtown Baghdad. And I got to watch you because I'm stuck in this, which causes me to continue to re-experience no matter where I go.
I got to ask you one question.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes I know people are assigned to go get therapy, and then some people come voluntarily. We all know that the voluntarily ones are, but do you have success sometimes with people that are assigned? They really don't want to be there, but they come.
Hey, listen, that's the only way. Those are the only people I saw in the military. Okay. They were not there on their own. They were there because something happened. Okay, and for a lot of them, either the wife comes home and says, I can't do this anymore. Or the military says, if you don't get control of that beast, you're going to be discharged. And here's the thing about the military, guys, and here's what they have to understand, is that the military, the fact that because you have PTSD, that excuses you from your behavior and not following the standards? Absolutely not. They're saying, listen, you can have it, but as long as it doesn't interfere with your military duties, we're good. The moment that starts to spill over, you either better get help or we're going to help you out. And one thing I'll say, one beautiful thing about the military is that because what happened, guys, we were discharging a lot of people with PTSD. Okay? And thank God that Congressman got something right, finally. All right? That they actually came back and they said, you know what? From a period of, I forget the years, we want you to go back and look at every person that you discharged, and we want you to look at the record and see if they actually had PTSD. And we actually had to go back and do that, and then those people actually got their benefits. Yeah.
You've been talking about military. I know this goes further than that. I have a kid with PTSD at home.
Yes.
And they're supposed to go to school. And she's a beast. Right? And you talk about, training spouses, you're going to train parents to do this.
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
it's not out there. And also
yes.
school teachers.
Yes.
How are they supposed to?
Yes. Yes.
And the kid that comes out of the
Now,
That's my question.
now do you see why I'm so excited about this opportunity? Because I feel like God is saying, okay, man, let me in this battle. You guys have been dealing with this stuff and you've been trying to do it without me. Okay, but now I'm making myself available to you to say, listen, you don't have to do this independent of me. Because you're right, it's going to take education. Okay, it's going to take education because that's what happens. And it's no different. You start to personalize this. Okay, but now if you step back and look at it and that, wait a minute, this is not personal. They're really struggling. That beast is really not about me. Listen, I don't want you to forsake your lunch, okay? I really don't. But I'm willing to hang around. But I'll let you go and ask that question. But I'm willing to hang around here if you have questions or whatever that texting is. But for those of you, again, thank you for coming. And I pray that I've said something that's going to kind of get you on the side where God can use you in this battle. Okay? All right. Thank you.
NAMI as a good group?
Yes.
Parents especially?
Yes, yes. But I will say again, guys, and I want to be so intentional, I would say any parent that's actually dealing with a child who's been through trauma, man, that they need to get together. Yeah. So I really want to be even more intentional in putting trauma people and connecting them because we've seen it have great outcomes.